The Grand Theft Auto modding community has been around for almost 2 decades as of the time of writing this video. And one of the oldest examples of a total conversion mod for GTA is also one of the most notorious zombie apocalypse mods of all time. And while zombie mods are something that are quite abundant within the modding scene, with people wanting to put zombies into pretty much everything throughout the 2010s, there's one mod that came out before all of these way back in 2005, with that game being the namesake of this video, GTA: The Long Night. Developed for Vice City by the modding team The Fighting Hellfish, shortly after Vice City was even released, was an arcade-like horror modification that didn't just add zombies into the coastal Florida town, but was a completely new game developed using Vice City as its base, while still staying in the universe somehow. Hell, there were even bootleg copies of this mod floating around at the time of this mod's release, allowing people to simply just play the mod by dropping this bootleg disc into their computer's disk tray, even if that could have been incredibly risky. But by utilizing Vice City's engine at the time, Fighting Hellfish were able to develop a pretty convincing zombie apocalypse set in a sun-drenched coastal city that we all know and loved. Yet Long Night takes this sunny location and gives a dark, brooding, and convincing setting of Vice City found under siege by the hordes of the undead. With zombies filling the streets and even pouring off of rooftops in some areas, it can be quite overwhelming if you find yourself unlucky to be cornered by a horde of biters. And even for a total conversion mod like this to be developed in such a short time after the initial release of Vice City, it is still a hell of an achievement that was made by this team. The Long Night story revolves around multiple survivors who have found their way to the last human stronghold left inside of Vice City, located at the Interglobal Movie Studios on Prawn Island. At first, we play as a nameless soldier who at the beginning of the game is tasked with installing a distress signal at the local VROC headquarters to broadcast a message telling people to relocate to the military stronghold made at the movie studio. After we blast our way through town in a rhino tank, we make our way across downtown VC and finally make it to VROC Studio. After we clear out the inside of the studio and plant the tape, we head out and are introduced to the main opposing faction to us besides the zombies, of course, the bikers, who we'll come to find out later are trying to claim the city as their own ever since the apocalypse went down. So they take off with our tank, and we need to either steal their bike or find another vehicle to outrun these bastards. But after we get away from them and make our way back to the studio, the mission completes and now we can explore the movie studio from here. And this studio is now technically considered a safe hub of sorts, where we can grab other missions to complete to progress through the game's story. Or we also have the option to leave the studio and go explore around a zombie-infested Vice City. And while that can be fun, you'll quickly notice that the zombies on this mod can easily outnumber you if you're not careful. But also, one of the funniest things I found about this mod is that you'll notice the zombies can still talk.
Where are you going? Even the cops are looking for me.
No me gustan esos chistes. Bravo. This is not the right part of town for you.
Now, I'm not sure if the mod author couldn't figure out at the time how to replace audio files, but it's still hilarious getting chased down and also getting insulted by the zombies half of the time. And while they're pulling out one-liners, sometimes they'll wait patiently by in some cases to let some other zombies go ahead and scoop your brains out. But even if you end up getting surrounded by the undead and getting wasted, dying in this mod really doesn't have any repercussions besides losing your weapons that you found out in the wild. Because if you die, you swiftly get sent back to the movie studio. And even in some missions, dying will just send you back to whoever provided you with that mission in the first place. So deaths aren't really that big of a deal. But when it comes to the missions and how they're structured, that's where the real fun comes into play. The way you do missions is by talking to some of the survivors in the movie studio, whose missions mostly consist of flashbacks of their escapades that led them to fleeing over to the studio in the first place. So you essentially play as multiple protagonists in this mod, way before Rockstar officially made multiple protagonists a main staple in the franchise, with each character having their own unique backstories that consist of pretty interesting missions that we get to play throughout the entirety of the game's campaign. like recalling the events that our local stoner ends up going through when he hears a giant stack of pot is over at the local police department, or the memories of a local playboy gathering all of his lady friends from the Malibu club in a limo, with that limo being one he stole from Mario and Luigi of all people. And I mean, yeah, there's some wacky stuff here and there, but besides having the chances to relive the memories of some of these characters, we also get to play out certain story missions as our main unnamed soldier guy, who I'm just gonna call Dave for the rest of this video. This is Dave.
Hi, Dave.
There's also a good variety of missions throughout the entirety of the experience as well, which won't just see you fighting hordes of zombies, but you'll also be facing against that local biker gang who's trying to reclaim the city for themselves. But really though, half of the time throughout the story missions, you're going to be doing some pretty fun objectives along the way, from doing things like simple fetch quests here and there while avoiding the undead, to more eclectic missions, like one halfway through the mod that has us flying a plane and dropping caskets of bombs onto that rival gang we talked about. And it kind of reminds me a bit of Dead Rising throughout the entirety of the experience. And I mean, this was way before Dead Rising was even a thing. With the sheer amount of zombies that you can have on screen, to the subtle nods to the overall zombie genre, I find it incredibly impressive for what's on offer here. Plus, there's actually a good bit of variety when it comes to the zombie models that are implemented into the game. Even for the engine being quite old, you can still get a fuck ton of zombies on screen at one time, and the game doesn't even chug a bit. There's also a few new vehicles you'll be able to drive throughout the story and even find out in the wild. And anytime there's new vehicles in these type of mods, I mean, that's always a plus in my book, just to add a bit more variety in what we can mess around with. But you'll also catch quite a few Easter eggs throughout this mod too, including some cheeky cameos from a few people you might recognize, like those two plumbers I mentioned earlier, of course, or even Fat Albert being in the roster of playable survivors that we meet throughout the story. And even for this time, the mod really went out of their way to include so many little things like this that, again, it still impresses me to this day that this came out way back in 2005. It's fucking awesome. Now, that's not to say that this mod is perfect. There are quite a few problems within this mod. Some pretty game-breaking ones, to be honest. There are, of course, some easy crashes you can get here and there, and some small little bugs like getting stuck on things. But there's also some pretty major ones like soft-locking yourself and halting your progress completely throughout the story. During one of those missions that I mentioned earlier, about the stoner rushing into the VCPD, you can easily soft-lock yourself by completely missing an objective that the game doesn't even tell you about in the first place. I've also seen online that you can easily soft-lock yourself in some of the flashback missions if you're not careful enough. So even with the mod's variety, there can be a bit of nuance to the way that you complete certain things. I usually recommend doing all of the flashback missions first and then move on to Dave's missions last, just to avoid soft-locking yourself in any way possible. But do be aware, not all flashback missions are required to be completed to even beat the game's main story, but it is still something I wanted to throw out there in case you wanted to see all of what this game has to offer. Also, apparently there were nightmare sequences or missions that could be completed whenever you take a nap in this game. However, I was only able to get one to work, and even then there was nothing really nightmarish about it. You just basically have to die in the mission. Oh yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, this game crashes quite a lot. Like, it's insane how often it can crash between missions. So because of that, I recommend that you save between like every single mission that you do, just in case. And I mean, to be fair, this mod was developed and released back in 2005, only like a year and a half after Vice City was even released. So running on modern systems is probably terrible for this old clunker of a mod. However, it was recently re-released on ModDB a couple years back, so if you wanted to check this mod out, I'll leave a link down in the description down below. Because next, I wanted to dive into what this story really consists of, because overall, it's not really that long of a game. And I did mention and preview some of the missions earlier, and to be completely honest, you could probably complete it within a few hours. So if you want to play this yourself and don't want to see what's inside of the story, I would recommend avoiding this section of the video, because I'm going to basically be spoiling everything from this point forward. Otherwise, go download the mod and play it. It's pretty damn fun, and it's a hell of a testament to the time that it was released. But if you're sticking around, let's go ahead and pick up where we left off when we got back to the movie studio as Dave. So after Dave makes his way back to the movie studio, we notice right off the bat that we have two ways of gathering missions from the start. We have this SWAT officer that's sitting outside of the studio, and also what seems to be our commander sitting over here by the gate. Our commander basically blows us off at this point, so the only person that we can talk to move forward is that SWAT guy I mentioned a moment ago, and he asks if we want to hear about how they took over the studio. And you'll notice this is basically how we take missions from other characters at this hub. You just talk to them and hit either yes or no. So of course, we're gonna go ahead and hear what this guy has to say. And this leads us to our very first flashback mission, which consists of most of the missions throughout this mod. But in this mission in particular, the soldier is tasked with helping reclaim the movie studio with a couple of his soldier buddies and clearing out the zombies and closing the gates. Now, there's only like 4 or 5 zombies here, so it wasn't that challenging, but there's some light storytelling here which is very reminiscent of Resident Evil, where you can actually find some notes in the area to give us more information on what to do. A note here tells us that 3 key cards to close the gate are located in studios A, B, and D. So after a bit of exploration and finding these key cards, the cutscene shows that the bikers had the same exact idea as the military by reclaiming this movie studio. So they start rolling in with a bunch of vehicles and even a bus that's starting to block one of the gates. So now we're gonna have to clear out the entire place of bikers, and holy shit, there's a ton of them. And once we slowly make our way through clearing them all out, we move the bus out of the way and get the gates closed, which is gonna complete our very first flashback mission of the game. After recalling the memories of this dude over here, we can now go talk to our commander and see what we can do next. So basically, our commander says that we can go ahead and be dropped out into the wild and progress with a plan that we have. Now, what this grand plan that our main character Dave has, well, we don't really know at this point quite yet. But don't worry, we are going to figure that out a few missions later. Basically what we need to do is take this hearse that we found on the streets and load it up with some barrels that are found in this local store. And these barrels contain highly flammable and explosive materials that we're going to be using later. Once we load them back into the car and try to make our way back into the car, which is probably the hardest objective at this point, we get back in the car and make our way over to the studio, which completes this next story mission. Now, if it seems like these missions are pretty easy or basic so far, just stick around because they are not all this simple. After this mission is complete, you'll notice that we have quite a few more people that we can interact with here at the movie studio, meaning that more survivors have moved in here and are taking shelter. So I noticed one guy sitting over here at the UFO prop just smoking a joint, and he asked if I wanted to hear about how he got all of this smoke in the first place. So he tells me how he heard about a tip of a huge drug lockup at the local VCPD department. So he makes his way there and scours through all the desks upstairs to find any information that he can muster to find the drugs here. But turns out another group had the same idea, and they pretty much took everything to the local lighthouse nearby. So once we clear out all the desks and find this key card, this is where we do that extra objective that I mentioned earlier that can easily be skipped. Once we grab this key card, we want to head back down into the cells downstairs, clear out the zombies in these cells, and then open them up so this survivor can run out free. This actually opens up a couple of extra missions later on, so without doing this, you could easily soft lock yourself out from doing later missions. Keep an eye on this one. But once we head outdoors, that completes the first stoner mission. His next one is going to have us go straight over to the lighthouse. But once we head over to the lighthouse, we noticed that it was actually a few cops that gathered the drugs and made their way here to make one last stand. So we just take them all out, grab the drugs, and as we're leaving, we notice an armored vehicle full of survivors driving away. But that's the end of the stoner missions. Pretty much won't give us any more from this point. So we head over to the next mission provider that's in Studio D, and she's just chilling over here on set. So we ask her what's going on, and she asks if we want to hear about her hero. This actually leads into the next part of the stoner's missions and shows the girl being pushed into the local bank by some thugs that want to clear it out. So the stoner notices this and rushes in to go save the day. And once you head inside the bank, literally everyone starts blasting you right off the bat. So you have to be very careful about your next move once you walk inside. But once we clear our way through the rest of the bank and move over to the back of the offices, you'll notice there's a computer that you can interact with. And it actually allows you to see through the cameras that are patrolling throughout the entire bank. And this was actually a pretty cool feature to see in this mod. I wasn't expecting this. But we'll notice that the girl's being held up inside of the bank vault here. So once we clear our way through the rest of the bank and up the elevator, the game basically gives us a hint that he's gonna blast her if we don't put our gun away. And I immediately almost forget this and nearly lose it all, but thankfully I put my gun away at the last second. He then turns his gun on us, and now we're free range to blast this guy to Kingdom Come. So once we save the girl, she goes ahead and gets a gun of her own, and we run the hell out of Dodge and escape with the armored van that they had and make our way to the studio. Our next mission consists of how she's diabetic and how her and her man made an insulin run at some point while they've been staying here. So she jumps out and heads into the local drugstore to loot the place and find some insulin, while we end up playing as the stoner again to create a distraction using a police car and circle around the front of the store, blasting our sirens to keep the attention of the zombies around the area. And while this is a fun little section to play through, you do have to be pretty careful to not get too far from the store or position yourself close enough to the zombies to throw you out of the car. Because if you end up getting stuck and they end up yanking you out, it's pretty much game over from that point. Like, the game tells you, like, hey, you have 5 seconds to get back into the car, but most of the time these zombies are just standing right in front of the door anyway, so you can't really do anything at this point, and you end up just exploding and having to do it again. But you can easily find a good rhythm to pass this one, and it just takes a couple of minutes. She comes back out of the car, and you head back home. Anyways, once we finish up her missions, we head back over to the SWAT dude and see if he has anything else we can do as Dave. And he asks if we want to make a gas run. And not only does this start to set up our second part of Dave's plan, but this also starts one of the harder missions in this game. And I'm not saying the hardest. We haven't got there just yet, but trust me, this one is kind of tough. This mission more or less has us defending our boys in the truck below with an M60 on the side of a helicopter. And there's going to be 2 drivers in that truck that you need to help survive until they make it all the way to the gas station on the other side of the island. Now, this first part's not too bad at all, and it kind of feels like no matter what you do end up losing one of the drivers at this specific point. But other than that, this part really doesn't have you do much besides shooting some zombies here and there. So it's not too bad. But once they make it to the gas station and load up the fuel canisters into the truck, this is where the mission starts to get a bit rough. We get the local BA boys coming back again, showing up to annihilate the truck as we're bringing it back to the studio. So at this point, you got to be pretty accurate with your shooting, as to really only aim for the bikers themselves. Because if you potentially catch their bikes on fire, the bikes could easily take out the truck and you'll fail the mission. Or they can end up shooting the barrels and get a lucky shot and it takes out the truck as well. But once you take out all the bikers and the truck makes it back home, we've now essentially completed step 2 of Dave's plan. But you'll also notice we have quite a few new survivors here at the studio that we can take missions from. So let's go ahead and dive through a few of these missions. The first person I end up talking to is set up over in this studio to the right. And this person I ended up talking to said she was dumb enough to head to one of the makeshift hospitals back when everything went down. So in her flashback, oh my god! Yeah, that incredibly annoying fucking noise is the fire from this hospital, because apparently it's burning down because of a mental patient that got loose here and set the place on fire. The doctor here lets us know that we need to turn on the sprinklers downstairs, but oh no, of course, a zombie sneaks up behind the doctor and takes him out. Now luckily we do have a shotgun right at the start, so we can easily take out the fire zombie ahead of us. So we grab the doctor's screwdriver for that sprinkler system he talked about, and we start heading downstairs. Now this part fucking sucks. Now we have to dodge all of these little spots of fire that are littered throughout the stairwell that we need to use to make our way all the way down this building. And if you've ever tried dodging fires in these old GTA games, you know it's damn near impossible, and as soon as you touch that fire, your health instantly starts draining. Luckily, you can use some iframes by jumping far enough and having your character kind of like roll through the fire. But then you got to worry about some fire zombies that just suddenly appear out of nowhere and make their way up the stairwell. So with all of these hazards in your way, you can only imagine how fucking painstaking this mission could be. And holy shit, dude, I almost called it quits here. I'm not even kidding. Luckily though, I was able to iframe roll my way through some of the fire and make it down to turn off the sprinkler system, which thankfully takes out the zombies too. Now, our objective at this point is to take out the dude that ran across the street, and if you see, they're already trying to live their best life here in the apocalypse, but not without our say. They just killed a ton of people over here in the hospital, and we're gonna take their asses out. Now, on this mission, I thought I soft-locked myself because I ended up shooting him down from street level, but the mission never really ended after that point. Turns out though, you just had to run all the way back up to the window that you started the mission from, because that's apparently where you needed to shoot the guy from, I guess. So once I made it back up there, I ended up completing the mission. So I went ahead to talk to him one more time and, oh, okay, well I guess they're underdeveloped, it seems. All right, we'll just move on to the next one. And the next person I went to talk to that had a mission available was the one and only Fat Albert over here. And yes, this is Fat Albert, by the way. The mod author even said it is over on their website. And I mean, who the hell remembers Fat Albert? I mean, that kind of shows you how old this mod is at this point. But anyways, his missions are actually quite fun. His first one has us using an RC helicopter inside of a mall to take out every zombie with the propellers of this copter. And while it is pretty fun at the start, it also is pretty challenging half the time, because you not only want to make sure not to damage the RC copter itself, because at that point if you do, it can easily blow up if you're not careful. Like if you end up hitting railings or any sort of world geometry around you, it can easily take you out. But after we complete that mission, his next one has him defending a Twinkies factory against that local biker gang we mentioned before. And we're basically perched up here at the back of this factory using a sniper rifle the entire time. But you can also run down on floor level if you feel like you want to get up close and personal with them. However, the best way of going about this mission is making sure that you keep the gate closed, as once the bikers get in on their motorcycles, they can easily drive over to the gate, open it up, and a swarm of bikers end up showing up in vans, on top of the ones you already have to deal with. But if you're quick enough and you end up defending this factory against the bikers, he ends up getting into the hostess truck down below, and his next mission has us blasting away the remaining bikers that are driving around in buggies. And once you end up wiping the slate clean with all these bikers, or just seeing some of them do it themselves, Fat Albert then heads over to the movie studio, which is where we see him now. And I just find it hilarious at this point that the two characters that have the most development, I mean, even surpassing our main character Dave here, yet the two characters that have the most development are a stoner and Fat Albert. Now, I never said the writing in this mod was great, but wow, I do find it hilarious at times. Anyways, after this, we go to our final survivor mission strand, which is a local playboy from here in town that ended up surviving with a couple of his friends over an apartment complex. But he wants to get the hell out of there so he can go grab all the ladies he knows and hole up with them somewhere. So he ditches his friend and this other dead one behind in that apartment complex and heads over to a spot that he knows a nice limo to be at. But once we try stealing this limo, we find out that the owners are fucking Mario and Luigi. Like, what? So they both get in opposing semi-trucks that are appropriately colored to themselves, and they end up trying to run us down here in the parking structure. But I end up jumping out to blast these dudes with my blicky. And once I take them out and grab the limo, we head over to the Malibu Club to grab the girls. But it ends up being a trap set up by some crazy biker dudes led by a psychopath in this club, having a mini boss battle here inside of the club set to some classic 80s music. Again, those Dead Rising vibes are coming full force, especially in this mission. But once we have the girls and head back over the limo, he lets them know that he knows of a hotel that we can hold up in. And so they head over there. Now, his next and final mission is about them holding up in that said hotel room that I just mentioned, which funnily enough is Tommy Vercetti's hotel from the main game. However, this mission fucking sucks. Like, it's kind of on par with the fire one. You have to hold up against a constant flow of zombies that are coming into the room. And if any of them get into the room and kill at least one of the girls, the mission ends up failing at that point. And I cannot figure out a way to get this completed whatsoever until I watched a stream that actually talked about this part of the mod, where they used an exploit within Vice City to actually complete it, where you basically have to crouch between shotgun blasts so you shoot a bit faster. And it kind of makes me think that you had to complete this mission with the exploit in mind, because by doing so, you end up capping every zombie on every shot that you make. Like, did they develop this mission with the exploit in mind? If so, that's kind of messed up. Like, especially for someone like me who didn't even know about it in the first place, it'd be damn near impossible for any newbie to complete this on the first go, or hell, even the 20th. But anyways, once we finish this mission, that pretty much finalizes his mission strand and all of the flashback missions that I know of. And from here, we can start completing the rest of the story missions by speaking to the commander. This first mission is where we see Dave's plan come full circle, and it turns out the barrels and explosive material that we stole earlier in that hearse were all going to be used to make coffin bombs that we're going to end up dropping on all the bikers' settlements and road blockades that they've set up around town. And while flying around, we're going to be in a custom skinned plane that has a bit better handling than the original one in the game. And plus, those coffin bombs that we made are basically mini nukes, and when dropped, we'll send some of the bikers' vehicles straight out into the hemisphere. It's crazy, dude. But once we clear out all of the biker strongholds and such, we're then told to head over to the tank's last known location. You know, the one that was stolen way at the beginning of the game? Well, it's basically at their headquarters. So we head over there, but as soon as we get to this checkpoint, a scripted sequence happens where it basically tells us that our engine is stalling. So Dave has the bright idea of kamikazing right into their headquarters and take out all of the remaining bikers that are located here. Unfortunately though, that means we lost Dave. We'll always remember you, Dave. and that sweet, sweet mustache of yours. Rest in peace, Dave. Rest in peace. Anyway, now we're playing as the stoner again, and now we pretty much have one more mission to complete at this point. So we go over to the commander and he asks if we have a plan to get everyone the hell out of here. Which, why the fuck is this commander asking the stoner? Like, does everyone know the stoner at this point is like the dude to like go to get shit done? Like, he's pretty much got a lot of shit done at this point. I don't blame him. But anyways, the stoner ends up gathering everyone into the bus here at the studio, and we start heading over to the docks, which has a yacht sitting over in one of the warehouses, and drive all the way down to the docks that are by the airport. Luckily, this part isn't too bad. I mean, you're just dodging zombies here and there, and they don't really damage the bus that much, so it's literally just driving to our destination. But once we get there and everyone piles onto the boat that's at the docks, we have to make one final stand with a random minigun that we just have out of nowhere and blast as many Zeds as we can until they get the boat jump started. Now, this sequence ends up taking way too long, and I ended up having some zombies get glitched, so I was just kind of sitting there half the time. But wait, what is that? It's a tank blasting over the barricade and onto the dock. At least that's how it should have looked in mine. Over here in mine, he kind of just like sat up there while the explosion went off, and oh my god, guys, it's Dave. Hey, Dave, yay, you made it. Holy shit, he's alive. Anyway, Dave piles into the boat, and then we all safely make it over into the yacht, and we drift off into the sunrise while the long night finally comes to an end. And crashes. Very appropriate ending for this mod, if I might add. But I gotta say, the consistency in the storytelling with like the tank, the plan, all that type of stuff, it's all pretty interesting overall. It does feel like a cheesy 80s zombie flick for the most part. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed my time with this mod. Not too long, not too short. I don't think it overstays its welcome or anything like that. I think it's actually a good paced mod. GTA The Long Night is a fantastic testament to what this modding community has been capable of with these game engines for so long at this point. Not only can players make compelling stories and incredibly engaging gameplay from these engines themselves, but community projects like this still stand the test of time over all of these years later, by still delivering entirely new games for us to play within the Grand Theft Auto universe. And while having talking zombie hordes chasing me down half the time was fun overall, I can comfortably say that The Long Night still holds a flame over so many other zombie overhauls made in the past 2 decades. With its unique take on storytelling and interesting mission design, this is easily one of the most inventive mods in the GTA community that I've had the pleasure of checking out here on this channel. I'm hoping someday when GTA 6 drops that someone can take the time to recreate something like The Long Night for the next generation to experience, as it would be insane to see what could possibly be done within that setting on Rockstar's next iteration of their in-house Rage engine. And while GTA 5 zombie mods are simple and I guess fine, none of them even compare to the scope and passion that was found in GTA The Long Night. And again, this mod released way back in 2005 by a small group of developers. So if you wanted to check out this little time capsule of the Grand Theft Auto modding community, I'll leave a link down in the description of the mod if you wanted to check it out. It's a hell of an experience to play through, and I cannot recommend it enough. Thank you to everyone who has been supporting the channel. If you have made it this far and you liked what you saw, definitely please leave a like on the video and sub if you would like to see more GTA modding content in the future. I got a few more GTA mods that I'm going to be checking out in the next few videos, so definitely stick around if you're into that sort of thing. Anyways, everybody, I hope to see you all in the next video, but for now, I will see you next time. Blado out.